There's above and beyond just the conversion rate optimization. They want to make their customers feel special and make sure everything's working and kind of moving off of some legacy tools onto more of a headless system, which it takes a lot of work. And I think a lot of people enter into that thinking this is going to make my life easier. This is going to be, I don't have to rely on the Adobe tech stack anymore. I can now pick the best of each section of my site, but that just inherently causes other problems too, which most folks are kind of talking to us because they want to monitor that and make sure they're not dropping the ball during these huge transitions.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert's Perspective. Joining us today, we have a different type of expert. We're actually doing an internal podcast for the first time ever with our wonderful new VP of Sales, Dan Wardle. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun. I've been watching the show for the past year, but now I get to be part of it.
Awesome. Well, starting off, we always want to learn a bit more about our guests. So maybe give a bit of a brief intro, Dan, and maybe why you joined Noibu and a bit more about your background.
Yeah, I would say my background's a bit non-traditional compared to most folks in this industry. I started at BlackBerry, like in hardware sales, then moved on to Salesforce.com, and then on to a company called Vidyard that was sales tech, so kind of following the Salesforce journey, and took that company right from kind of the beginning to where it is today at 300 plus people. But along that way, I met Kailin and I started chatting about e-commerce industry. And it was just what surprised me the most is like this interesting gap that I expected tons of companies to play in, which is, you're building all your websites and nobody's actually monitoring whether they're working or not and whether customers are experiencing issues. And when I really started to dig into the company and the ecosystem, I was like, wow, I've got to be a part of this. And so I kept in touch with Kailin for a year until it was the right time to join the company.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro. And Dan, why do you think there is such a gap in the market? Like you said, technical monitoring is not a new category, right? For as long as people have been building websites and infrastructure, people have been monitoring it. What do you think it's so unique about commerce in which almost it really spurs up a brand new category?
Yeah, that's what I've been really rattling my brain on. So I've been here about 6 months now, almost, surprisingly. It's flown by. Is like, why isn't there more people in this space? And the thing that I think it comes down to is, if you're a product designer, you could work for any company. It doesn't mean you're a product designer for e-commerce. It doesn't mean you're a product, you could be a product designer for Vidyard, for Salesforce. And you use the same tools. You're using design monitoring tools to see heat maps and understand like how to do all of that. And it's not a e-commerce specific tool. And same thing with the backend monitoring. You've got all of the app monitoring tools out there like New Relic and Datadog, and the engineers are used to using those tools to monitor all their API calls and their servers and everything. And it doesn't matter whether you're e-commerce or enterprise software, you're using the same tool set. But there's this gap in between where nobody thought to actually monitor the e-commerce like checkout flow and add to cart flow and all of that because it's kind of a niche. It's in the e-commerce space specifically. And so you can't build a horizontal tool that's going to work for all companies because Salesforce's website doesn't work on a add to cart function. So nobody's monitoring that whole functionality. And that's, I think, really where this gap exists and what you and Rob and Phil found during the founding of the company.
Yeah, no, obviously we've been super close to the problem. And I think really to help build on that as well is I think the reliance on staff augmentation through SIs or through agencies is really big in fashion e-com or just in e-com in general, because for the most part, you don't consider yourself like a technologist. You consider yourself a retail brand first. So it's kind of then becomes like, where do you put all your efforts, right? Are you going to try and build a full-blown internal team? We often see that there's a collaboration between a smaller internal team and a systems integrator, which then becomes who actually owns monitoring. Is it the systems integrator? Is it internal? So I think that's also part of that reason. But I'm curious, now that you've been here for 6 months, we've invested a bit into conferences. Obviously, you consume a lot of data and a lot of customer calls. Like, what are you seeing as some of the top trends emerge for this year in commerce?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to talk to so many folks. They're all going through this kind of emergence of the pandemic, huge growth in their companies to now, our traffic's flat year over year for the first time in a decade. And so what do we do about that? We need to optimize every person who comes to our site. So through, conversion rate optimization tools, through page speed, through search optimization. I'm hearing a lot about search. Like when somebody search on my site, does it show them, Amazon style, here's other things you might be interested in. And so you're hearing a lot about, Algolia and everyone who plays in that space. But then above and beyond all of that, you're also just hearing they want more flexibility. They want to be able to, the word composable gets thrown around. It's like, I want to be able to plug and play any system. I want it to look bespoke and look like our POS system in the store or whatever it might be. And so there's above and beyond just the conversion rate optimization. They want to make their customers feel special and make sure everything's working and kind of moving off of some legacy tools onto more of a headless system, which it takes a lot of work. And I think a lot of people enter into that thinking this is going to make my life easier. This is going to be, I don't have to rely on the Adobe tech stack anymore. I can now pick the best of each section of my site. But that just inherently causes other problems too, which most folks are kind of talking to us because they want to monitor that and make sure they're not dropping the ball during these huge transitions. I was comparing it, talking to a colleague the other day, when somebody switches their marketing tech stack, well, the customer doesn't really experience that. It's all behind the scenes. You might get a different email. The trigger points are different, all of that, but it's not an overhaul of your core product, which is your website. And so when you're migrating to a new tool, when you're going headless, any changes that you're making, it's like your store got a revamp. It's like all of a sudden, your Cartier store has a different logo, like a huge difference, and everything's in a different color because the customer experience is going to be different when they go to their website the next time. And they may be used to where to click, and now it's in a different spot. And so it's just interesting to see folks kind of jump into these replatforming without realizing it's like a complete re-architecture of your business. And so there's been a lot of conversations about that and the delays and how long it takes. And then to your point, the coordination with third-party agencies to do the work as well.
Yeah, and we've seen this across different industries. No one really knows where the economy is right now. Is it a recession? Is it not a recession? One thing that we do know for sure is that spending has been kept flat, moderately increased, or decreased in a lot of cases. When you look at large projects, we saw a ton of large projects in 2020, 2021, people upgrading legacy systems. Like, what do you think the next couple of years looks like? Is it really kind of, hey, we've made all the big quantum leaps forward from an investment standpoint, and they're looking to really iterate? Or how are you seeing, like in our customer conversations, how people are viewing their current stack? They did the big replatforming, what's next to drive performance?
Yeah, it does seem to be all over the map. The search comes up a lot, just optimizing when somebody hits your page, what that flow is going to be like and how you're going to target them. But I think what I'm learning is as you get into the forward looking, it's like, how does AI actually start to help that by, automatically building new product pages, by automatically, suggesting what's going on based on your history. Whereas today, our customers are having to manually select those flows. Like, okay, if they see this product, show them this thing. Or if they buy this, send them an email about this. I think the future could be, and the tools aren't quite there yet, but there's been a lot of talks about them of like, how do we just take that to the next level? And I think the key piece in that, just like in software tech, where you think of, how many employees to your revenue ratio, these companies are now thinking like, I can't continue to spend on all of this innovation because our revenue is probably only going to grow. The industry standard right now is 8% or worse. And so it's like, okay, how do we spend less, but get increased production? How do we have less people focused on these things? And we're seeing that across a lot of our customers where they'll have a smaller team and our product helps them be more efficient to find the errors and fix things. But what other tools will make the team more efficient? So instead of having to contract an agency for 400 hours a month, maybe it's only 200. But how do you still get the same output of it? And they're really looking for tools to help with that speed and efficiency, which some of them are AI and some of them are just better tools.
Makes sense. You've now gone to a couple of industry conferences. You went to eTail, you've been to a Shop Talk, you've even been to kind of a connections event. Maybe talk to us a bit about those events and what some of your takeaways were from events in general, but also maybe kind of what you learned from them.
Yeah, the events, I think, feels very similar, feels very much like my old world in sales tech and marketing tech. Although I think the trouble with events is they have to build sessions for each of the different personas. You've got engineering, you've got marketing, you've got e-commerce, thinking about the revenue pieces, and each of them have very different needs and wants from those conferences. So it's good that they're creating these tracks that you can kind of pick, and you really have to be careful which sessions you go to make sure they're relevant for your role. So that's kind of the key piece, like my learning of like how to do a conference well. Make sure you're picking the right sessions and the right, tracks. Like I went to Salesforce and they were trying to push me towards all the marketing sessions, but I wanted to go to the commerce sessions and really understand what e-commerce professionals are dealing with right now. So that's that. The other thing is now, what they're actually showing you. It's very exciting, but I think a lot of the show and tell that these tech companies are doing is here's what's going to be possible. It's going, you just upload one image of your product. We will generate 5 other images, write a description for you, write the title, and automatically put it in your page and into your search. And I think in theory that works, but there's going to be a leap of faith that companies have to make where, today you've got content people writing those descriptions. You've got SEO people thinking about how it interacts with that. And like, are you going to trust that, AI is going to write that properly for you? And I watched the presentations and it's amazing future vision. But when I talk to customers and attendees, they kind of see that as the 2-3 year vision. And they're interested to see how other companies do it. They don't want to be the early adopters. They want to wait till, we're past that hurdle, that leap of faith that people have to make. They want to wait till it's crossed the chasm in the old sense. So that's what's exciting about the future is like just super automated and super efficient. But there's just a lot of proof in the pudding that needs to happen over the next couple of years.
Makes sense. Building on top of that, when you look at the space in general, big investments been made. Now there's like the next AI wave that's happening. Do you think websites are going to get more and more standardized over time? Or do you see them getting more and more custom over time? And like how, when you think about that, do you relate that to the in-store experience? Or are those like two different things? And does it depend on category? I guess what I mean is like, if you want to buy a bottle of Nesquik, don't know why that came to mind. I don't even know if that's available in the US, but it's a Canadian product, or at least we have it in Canada. Do you really need like a custom bespoke experience for shopping for something that's more of a commodity versus like, hey, I'm investigating if I want to buy a Tesla or Polaris? So yeah, curious about how you're thinking about that and then how that relates back to kind of the in-store experience where like Walmart and Apple Store look completely different.
Yeah. So I actually had a great chat with my brother-in-law yesterday who runs a large e-commerce store here in Canada for an international brand. And he was struggling with that too, because it's not their core business, but they're doing, millions in revenue. And so they're concerned with like the little things because they have brand guidelines, they have quality control, like they want to be seen as a quality brand. But in their, templated store, things weren't lining up. So there was like products at different levels as he scrolled down the page. And he's like, how do I get those to align? And it's like, well, you're using a template. You can't really custom code it. So, you need to move to like a headless system and put some more effort behind it. And so I do think brands that, aren't just bargain brands, like any brand that is trying to really say, hey, we have quality products, does need to think about that. And like, how do I create simplicity while matching our quality? And there's going to be that balance where, I've chatted with some customers last week at the conference that we're moving to composable and hybrid headless. And so they could customize some areas of their site, but then leave the core pieces of their site, maybe it's the checkout, things like that, to the standard flows so that they're not messing it up. But their initial, page views and initial few top of funnels have that quality feel to them as they navigate through the funnel. So I think it's going to be a balance where you really have to think, when somebody comes to your website, are they instantly recognizing your brand? Or does it feel like, my wife owns an e-commerce store as well on Etsy and Shopify and sells some stuff that she makes around locally. Like, you don't want to feel like that. No offense to her, but like, if you're Cartier, you don't want people to think that you're the same as my wife's store. And so that's where you really have to start to match your brand, your design language, all of that, so that people feel like it's a seamless transition. Like I was at a Lululemon store yesterday, and then I get the emails and it's like, they know who I am. They know my previous orders. They know my sizes. Like it all flowed. I went up to the checkout, had the wrong size in my hand. She's like, are you sure? And like swapped it out. Like you want to feel that same thing when you're buying online.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. And like my thought on that as well is when you look at the enterprise value outside of the hyperscale discount brands like the Amazons, the Walmarts, like unless your core competency is selling other things cheaper, like a Costco as well, and you look at the enterprise values of a lot of the retailers, the ones that did a little bit of this and a little bit of that have really struggled to stay around. If you look at the value, it's in the extremes. And what I mean by that is like Amazon, Walmart, Costco, high enterprise value. Then on the other side, you have like LVMH, like Tiffany, Cartier, Richemont, like the high end brands. And then like Nike, Adidas, like that, where it's like they do prioritize quality, and then you go into the Nike store, it's like different than the Adidas store, even though they're competing in the same market. And I feel like the middle has been where a lot of like value's been destroyed in the sense of, I think it's pretty well documented that an executive at Gap or ex-executive at Gap invented discounting, where it was like a little bit, and not to look further than Hudson's Bay, actually, who's a Canadian example. We love them, but the enterprise value has been consistently struggled or deprecated over time because it was a bit of both strategies. It was appealing to quality, but then discounting. And I think that kind of goes well with what you're saying. And I think brands that will invest in their brands and think it's a big part of the competitive advantage to retain more value over time will actually do more things to customize versus, hey, it's going to be cheaper to run a template. Let's just do that. So it's interesting. Obviously, everything I just flagged is just one person's opinion, but I'm curious to see how it plays out over time at the very least.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I'm finding a lot of, to your point, like the discount brands that are going headless, they're customizing, like they're doing really well and are, beating expectations and things in the market. And so it's exciting to see that because personally with my young kids, like I don't want to be having to buy them designer clothes. Like these online, I kind of, as you can tell, live in the middle of nowhere. And so I'd love to be able to order things online whenever I need to at a reasonable price. And so it's been, the last 4 years has been great for us personally as well, just to see this transition to e-commerce, even traditional brands like, Home Hardware, who's a great customer that, it's a local hardware store like Home Depot that instead of having to drive 20 minutes, can order it or, if it's large items, pick them up, but still order them online. Chatting with a great customer last week, same idea. They're like a large end of the roll kind of discount furniture place, especially for outdoor furniture in the northeast of the US. And their e-commerce store only started in 2022, but they've used it to set themselves apart and expand their reach to their, above and beyond their 22 stores. And you can go online, find like a great patio set that's end of the line, that's got, they've got 5 of them and be able to order them, but you have to pick it up in the store because the stuff's too big. But at least you're not going to the store and then being disappointed that they didn't have what you wanted because they only have 5 of this or 3 of that. Like they're an end of the roll kind of discount place, but they've really blown up online being able to do that. So it's been interesting to hear all these different kinds of companies and just different trends that are happening. I think the other big trend I'm seeing is B2B. Like a third of our sales lately have been in the B2B space where they want to stop people calling into their account manager to order parts. Like I don't want 10,000 people, sending out some screws and bolts and pipes. And so like MSC Industrial is like, okay, let's just do it all online. And so people stop faxing in their orders and having some manual person put it in. Like, let's create an e-commerce store for them. And it's been amazing to see all those companies because you don't even see their websites. You're not allowed on them. They're behind the scenes. But they've been amazing customers the last little while because they want to make sure they've got a perfect experience because those people are used to an account manager handholding them through everything. And now they want them to do it online on their own. So it needs to be perfect.
Makes a ton of sense. Well, Dan, I think that's a wrap. Appreciate your time. This was a great first internal episode. We'll try and layer these in more often, but appreciate your time, Dan. Very useful insights.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kailin. Talk to you soon.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.